what is Hex? Like, what was the inspiration for Hex? What does it do for people today? Just walk us through a little bit about the problem that it is solving.
Yeah, so in some ways, we have all this background building analytics tools in general, but in some ways, the genesis of Hex is actually a very, very acute, specific problem. And that is trying to marry sort of the accessibility and shareability of traditional BI. So, no one ever has a problem building a Tableau dashboard and sending it to someone, or building an Excel spreadsheet and sending it to someone, with the power, the analytical power of something like a code notebook. There was basically at Barry's previous job, quite frankly, Barry's our CEO, he was literally looking to try to buy something that did this. All of the data teams were working in code, Python code notebooks, Jupyter notebooks. It was actually a pretty sophisticated data team. They had pretty heavy operational work that required a lot of this backing analytics. But the executive team just had no ability to actually consume these things. What are you going to do? Email them a Jupyter notebook? And so they were falling back on all of these, copying and pasting charts into decks. And sometimes we saw this over and over again in the different teams that we talked to. The more sophisticated teams would be doing things like they would take their notebook and push it up to whatever their cloud system was and run it on a schedule and dump it into Snowflake. Probably that was like flowing into dbt or something, which was then downstream was Looker. And like, that's how they would actually get all of the analytics done. And it just seemed like there had to be a better way to do this. And so that's kind of how Hex was born. It was really the combination of the realization that these analytics workflows were deeply, deeply collaborative at the very heart of them, both between the different analysts and also between analysts and the rest of the company. And that the tooling to do that just really hadn't caught up with today's sort of modern code-based analytical workflows. And so really that's a problem that we're trying to solve.
Like if there is magic there, like what is that thing that somebody is reacting to? Like what does it unlock when you like build one of these more interactive experiences?
Yeah. So I think that there's a couple places where I see magic when we show this to people for the first time or when they've been using it for a while. And I think the two things that I would call out there are in the building of the dashboard, or not dashboard, but app, I guess, is the more accurate term of describing some of these things. It's just the ability to go hook up to your data, write a couple lines of code, put it in a thing, and then ship that out within 10 minutes.
Sure.
And people who have never seen anything like that are just like, oh my God, I spent 5 hours making this like slide deck, and now I can do this in 30 seconds. And then on the other end, I think part of the problem with dashboards in some ways is that they don't actually integrate super well into the actual work to be done. Like you look at the dashboard and you're like, okay, well, here are the numbers. And now I need to still go and do a whole bunch of other things based on those numbers. And so they take some chunk of the workflow out, but they're not actually solving your problem. Whereas if you build a data app, you can actually build in and automate out some, like a bunch more and a much larger swath of the workflow that is coming out of the analytics that you're doing. And that's where you get some of these magic things like, people who are like one-man shows on their data team being able to build a whole bunch of these complex data workflows out because they can automate it in Hex in ways that they wouldn't have been able to if they'd just been emailing someone a dashboard. And then that person is like, okay, based on X, Y, and Z, I need all of these other things. And you have to go do them yourself.
Hey, everyone. Just dropping in to let you know that the annual Analytics Engineering Conference, Coalesce, is back. We had the first Coalesce last year in December, and it was fantastic. We had 3,000 registrants, tons of presentations, and this year is going to be even bigger. Register for free at coalesce.getdbt.com.
It feels like we're at the beginning of something new. Like we've been describing it in a lot of different ways, this thing that Hex is or that you're building. Is this a new category that you're defining, like the collaborative data app?
Yeah, I do feel like it is a bit of a new category. I think similar to the way you all have been talking about analytics engineers and analytics engineering as a new discipline. It's not like any specific part of that, if their roots in other things, but this category of work didn't exist 10 years ago, and it has rapidly sort of developed into this broad discipline. I do think that there's a similar change happening in the more analytics side. So not just kind of in the data engineering and the pipeline and the transformation side, but also in analytics, and maybe just like a year or 2 or 3 kind of behind in how it's evolving. And that is to basically, as I was saying earlier, use code-driven tooling to do the analytics workflows that before would have been point and click. They would have been in the Tableau, Looker, Excel, all of these things, moving those into more of an engineering discipline. And I certainly haven't seen a lot of things out in the space that are conceptualizing it like that. And I do think, there are products that, do great jobs at slices of this workflow. Like there are great collaborative notebooks out there, and there are great SQL editors out there. But thinking about it as a discipline and thinking about it as a set of sort of really connected workflows is something that we think a lot about at Hex. And I haven't heard a lot of other people conceptualizing it in the same way. And I do think that leads us to a lot of really interesting opportunities to innovate in that space, and kind of look beyond a little bit what we're seeing in sort of existing tooling and stapling together a bunch of existing projects and think about, okay, well, if you were to reinvent from scratch what this population of users actually needs and wants, what would that actually look like? And that's some of the things that I'm most excited about looking at in the coming months and years.